So thanks for coming on to this. I hope it's been a good Rosh Hashanah day for you. We've been having lots of conversations about a whole variety of things, but what we wanted to do for this hour is talk a little bit about the service itself and what that what it was that you experienced, how that came about, what our thinking was behind it, and a little bit of behind the scenes, perhaps. So I'll share a little bit of the process, and then I'd love to just kind of hear your reactions or questions or anything along those lines, unless Rabbi Joseph wants to jump in. I think I am flying solo. Thank you, Steve. No, okay. Rabbi Joseph has to jump off in a little bit. Do you want to make some comments before we start?
I don't think he does. Well, I think that, as Rabbi spoke about in his sermon, we had this little preview watching our Christian friends think about Easter when we were thinking about Passover, but, Easter being, one of their most major holidays. And so, part of this is that we're always thinking about the high holidays, but in a quote unquote normal year, it is not something that we're planning in May. So, this has sort of been a really interesting experience in that, there was never sort of a break, that we've been thinking about this for months and months and months, as we hope that you can see, and Rabbi will talk, more about this. But, again, trying to deal with what's right in front of us in this moment, as I keep saying, and then we were thinking about, and we're planning for the holidays, and we really sat down and had these early conversations. The conversations weren't about technology. The conversations were about community and connections. The conversations were about what do we feel? What are the emotions that are elicited over the high holidays, and not just the liturgy, but the whole experience, whether it's the frustration of not being able to find a parking spot, and then being greeted so warmly by our ushers, and then as somebody talked about, then the beauty of the building because it's been polished, and really actually thinking through all of these elements to what is it that is just going to be, we have to grieve for this year, and what is it that we want to create out of that. So I would just say, as I'm probably taking everything that Rabbi Kahn would say, but as sort of, really starting from that place. For the family service, if any of you, I'll speak a second to that, since I'm going to have to jump off earlier, but if any of you have watched that, or if you have, kids, you don't have to be a kid. You can just be a kid at heart to see it. But even for that, we chose to film it in the temple when actually we normally film in Goodman Hall. And we just thought about, for example, the space of Goodman Hall, there's no attachment to the space. There's an attachment to the community. There's an attachment to the energy and the ruach, differently than the main services. So we actually decided to film the family services in the temple sanctuary, which is very different because it elicits different emotions. And then it was really important for us in the family service, to figure out how can we, keep the energy. And so we did some really silly things. I mean, if you can watch and you can see us standing in the Willamette, singing Mi Chamocha, and we were, my dog stole the parachute, which people have taken screenshots and sent to me. I feel like it was one of those eggs that I should have put out like a funny guide, see if you find all these things in the family service. Our dog thought it was the best hot Shabbat ever, and we were filming one of our things outside, and grabbed the parachute, and I was on a trampoline blowing the shofar. I mean, right, all of these just ridiculous things that I did not learn in rabbinical school, but to create that sense of hope and of joy, because ultimately, the holidays and everything coming, and then of course Justice Ginsburg dying, but that we have to go in as a hopeful people, as a joyous people, that the holidays will continue to come. And I think that was what was conveyed, especially I hope in the family service, which I take responsibility for. So whether it was good or bad, I'll take the responsibility for that one. And trying to lean in technology and all of that. And I can say also for the main service, and as you guys saw, I'll take responsibility. I was the one who chose to do my sermon from home, which I'd be interested to hear feedback on that. I'll tell you, when I saw it all together, I was like, oh, I'm not sure if that was the right decision, because it felt like very different and very jarring from how, but I wanted that because I was talking about, community beyond the synagogue walls in that way. But so just a few of the big, I will stop talking. I've talked too much.
No, that's really great. And so let me give the history of that, because and I think the Rabbi Joseph sermon is an important component to all of this. When we, going back to, again, right after Easter, as we were kind of seeing that, all of these churches were coming up with some very creative ways, and nobody knew very much about COVID or what this pandemic was going to be doing. And we were seeing the drive-through, the parking lot, communions, all kind of just really, really interesting things that were happening. And I remember one day we were in a staff meeting on Zoom, and Josh was like bouncing around like a little boy. He was just like so excited. He's like, what can we do? If we do this, we could do anything. What could we do? And just like opening up the concept of not what are we losing, but what possibilities could be gained. What we're losing was obvious. We certainly knew in April that we weren't going to be having a gathering of 1,000 people. There was no scenario where that was going to be happening. So we didn't know any of the details in between, but we certainly knew that kind of a gathering wasn't going to happen. And so we really wanted to start thinking very, very quickly about what it could look like. We had a couple of principles from the very beginning, and this had to do with all of the decisions that we've made in terms of how do we open and when do we open and all those kinds of things. Part of we articulated those principles. I don't have it in front of me, but the very first and most important principle was pikuach nefesh, was protecting the life, the health, and safety of everyone, of our congregants, of our staff, the maintenance people who are there, the clergy, everybody, and the choir members. So we really started from that as the first thing. Like, what can we not do, because we have to protect the people that we have to protect. And that was going to be our first thing. The second principle was inclusion. We very quickly determined that we didn't want to have a service where some people would be invited and some people wouldn't be invited. Where we'd have to make some kind of delineation that we could have 50 people in the room or something. And we said, we decided early on, it was either going to be everybody or it was going to be nobody. And it was pretty clear there was going to be nobody. Okay, so once you've made those kinds of decisions, now what? Like, how do we begin to proceed? And as Rabbi Joseph said, the first thing that we did was not hire a production company or think about what kind of cameras or any of those kinds of things. The very first thing we did was we sat down, and this took us actually quite a lot of time. And we walked through every element of the high holiday experience, from the frustration of not being able to, actually started before that. What does it feel like when you get your tickets in the mail? Like, what's that emotion? And the other side of the equation is, what's the emotion when you don't have that? Like, what is it that people are going to be missing? And what's the experience of parking? And what's the experience of walking in the door? And what's the experience of seeing the ushers and walking into the space for the first time and all that? And knowing that we were going to be missing all those elements if we just did, you know, a Zoom service and we pretended it was normal in some way. We had the advantage in that we've been streaming our services for years. This wasn't new to us, the idea that we would share the service that we're experiencing, that we would share, and that people in Los Angeles, every year we hear about people who are watching our services. But every year, it is very much the afterthought. It's like, that is, you know, we know we're doing it, but we're going to pay attention to the service. And then we know that other people are going to be able to watch it, and that's great. What happens when we turn it all around and we start from the beginning with the experience of watching the service, and that's going to be the experience for everybody. So so it was a lot of thinking about all of those different elements before we sat down and we started talking to a production company. The other piece that was very important as we're talking about the Pikuach Nefesh and preserving the health of everybody who's involved, one of the primary concerns became the musicians. We're very lucky. We have these wonderful musicians that we've gotten to know over the years, choir members, instrumentalists, accompanists, who we're very close to, and their artistry is just so very important. And, you know, generally we stick them up in the choir loft and, you know, have at it. And it was clear that we couldn't do that. It was actually a real question about if we could have a choir at all, because singing is a spreading event. Like, if 6 feet is what you do in a sort of normal social interaction, a singing interaction is probably 20 feet. The truth is, no one's researched it. People have researched it, but the research was happening while we were planning. And I don't even think that there's consensus about those things. This was also before we even knew about droplets, about, you know, aerosoling. It was, you know, at the time it was, you know, the direct interaction that everybody was worried about. Now it's even more so. So so that led to a number of decisions. We decided that we could have the choir. We instead of an octet, we had a quartet to limit the number of people who would be in the sanctuary at any one time. We decided no matter what we were doing, we would have a small number of people who would be in the sanctuary, which meant that we couldn't have the choir and instrumentalists at the same time. The violin and some of the other instruments that you heard.
I got to take over here for a second.
Oh, there you are, Cantor. Good, because I'm making this stuff up.
Yes, you are. Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm a little late. So, yes, for the most part. But what we did was we did have a limit on how many people could be in the sanctuary. And we decided to use all 8 of our normal octet, but I divided them. So one quartet was for Rosh Hashanah, the people that I felt had lighter voices in a way. And the other quartet I used for Yom Kippur. There was some crossover in terms of who I used. One of the choir members was the conductor, because one of the difficulties in that space is, you know, there's kind of a delay, and we had to space them out at least 20 feet apart. At the time, that was the guiding principle for singers, 20 feet. And there has been since then a lot of conversation and going back and forth about how much is it actually, because of the aerosolization of the droplets. But we checked with the choir members to make sure they were comfortable with it. If you were not singing or speaking, you were masked at all times in the sanctuary. So at the most, what we would have is quartet, pianist, violinist, one instrumentalist, and me, and maybe a clergy person up there too. So, and that would be it. But we would be 20 feet apart. And so the interesting thing was, there is a little bit of delay in between. So we were so intensely looking at each other the whole time. That's one of the things I worried about during the filming was, I'm going to look like a crazy person because I'm, you know, listening so hard, looking, trying to make sure this stays together. So
Can you just explain where the choir
yes,
members were?
they were out in the house. So they were in your kind of in the seats. We had, you know, like all the way house right. We would have the soprano with a music stand and a microphone, not for amplification, but for recording purposes. That was interesting. Nothing was for amplification. It was all for recording purposes. So we really got to hear ourselves. Then we would have, you know, 20 feet away in the middle of a row, another choir person and so on into to the other side of the room. And then the violinist would have to be in another, or the flute player, depending what we have, would have to be in another place. The other interesting thing about this was because we were trying to protect them and conserve their time, we would have to record all of Yom Kippur with that quartet in a chunk, like in a day, and then all of Rosh Hashanah, that music in a day, and it all had to be labeled. I know this is probably too much inside baseball, but the charting of all of that was crazy, you know. So I was up there with my fake clapboard like they do in the movies going 1A, Ma Tovu, take one, you know, etc. So that was a learning experience. I thought I learned a lot about Zoom. Now I have a whole new respect for movie making. Anyway, okay, back to you, Rabbi.
No, that was great. I'm really glad you were able to go on and continue. And I don't know if Rabbi Joseph has had to leave or if she's still with us. But everybody jump in because I think the inside baseball is the whole point of this, right? So this was the part that I at least was hoping was not obvious when you're watching this, in that the service was actually recorded in segments and completely out of order. So in order to maintain the safety of the musicians, the choir members, and the instrumentalists, we recorded all of their things at various times, as Cantor said. And then once we had done those segments, we would record the entire service with the clergy on the bima, and then just stop and say, insert 1A here, and then go on to the next section. So it was very, very odd process to be doing this to an empty room. And you know, it would just required a lot of imagination on our parts to just, you know, see you there in the congregation. And a lot of conversation about continuity. Right? Is the ark open? Is the ark closed? You know, did we film it the right way? Did we do this? So there was, you know, in movie making, which really was the sort of model, there would be like a whole crew of people doing just that. Right? There's a continuity person, and there's like somebody who says this is the name of this thing and does the clap and all that. And basically, that team was Cantor. she just had to keep track of all of this stuff. So it was really quite remarkable.
Well, that didn't always work. I think there was a time or two where the ark was open when, you know, we were in, it was just interesting if you watch closely, but okay, everyone is forgiving. I wanted to do a shout out to Josh, just in terms of all the interfacing that he did with Benjamin Arif, who's the main, that is the production guy that we ended up going with after interviewing various people. Josh did all of this kind of research, and Benjamin is a congregant and just a lovely guy, wonderful to work with. But so much of the behind the scenes also was Josh kind of working with him to explain and what would we need, and then him identifying the people that we needed, me saying at a certain point, you know, these are really high level singers and instrumentalists, and we need an audio engineer. Oh, and then, you know, we had to get, but Benjamin found this fabulous young man, Brannick, who also teaches at Grant, I think it's Grant High School. He teaches
so.
audio, tech, visual. Anyway, so just a really stellar kind of little group of people to mix it and edit it and record it and put it all together with, you know, Brannick was like the kid with the candy box full of every kind of microphone you can imagine and cable, and thank God. But anyway, I thank you, Josh, for just all that, helping to coordinate them and finding Benjamin for us, because it would have been a whole different experience if we didn't have a production team like that to work with. And I know it sounds weird. It feels weird to me to even say that about sacred service. And but you know, worship is sacred drama, and you know, much as we try not to be performing, and you know, we don't like to think of it that way, we don't like to think of the bema as a stage, there is an element of that. And boy, this really highlighted that all of those pieces are so important. And I think the work that we did, as Rabbi was saying, weeks and weeks ahead of time, in terms of talking about, you know, making a kind of charts, emotional charts about what is the expectation, where will the disappointment be, what might replace that. That was the most important work for us, I think. Not that we hit on every point, but if we couldn't think through, you know, what was our expectation, what was our disappointment, what might yours be as a congregant, I just don't think it would have been the same experience. So
yeah, and I want to say that this production team, these young guys, were so respectful and so interested. Like they really wanted to know what does this mean? What's the, you know, they hadn't been in a synagogue before except for Benjamin, and they you know, it was, their heart was in this as well. And these things, you know, we used to, when we were in rabbinic cantorial school, we had one of our professors who was like, one of the things that he talked about was, you can have this, you can create this beautiful service and you can do all the liturgy right. And if the heat is off and everybody's cold, or if the sound system doesn't work and they can't hear, it doesn't matter, because that's all anybody's going to pay attention to. And it's right? I mean, you really do, if you're a liturgy leader, you really do have to be aware of all of the environment and those kinds of things in order to make all of that disappear. So I'll give one example that I think was just a really, really specific. For those of you, if you saw the Great Aleinu, and we kind of had some conversations about whether we would actually, you know, Cantor and I went down, bowed all the way down to the ground. You know, when we decided there was something we wanted to do, we had to talk to the sound guy, because Cantor's singing as she's standing, and then she's singing when she's on the ground. And you don't want to, as a person who's experienced it, you don't want it to be and then right? You want it to be absolutely seamless. So we had to explain to him what we were going to do, and he put a microphone on the ground, so which you didn't see. But you know, you just have to think about all those different elements, or have people who are who you can say, this is what we're going to do, and you say, I can take care of that. I got it.
Wait a minute, is Rabbi Joseph still on this call?
I think she said she had to get off.
Oh, okay.
Is she?
Because did she tell her story yet
Which one?
About what?
about the Torah, being at the Ark with the Torah?
No, no, she didn't tell that
Okay.
story.
Can I tell that story?
Tell that
And then I
story.
want to open it up for questions. Okay.
I wanted to tell one.
So-
I wanted to tell.
Oh, go
another
ahead.
thing before we do that.
Okay, go ahead.
No, tell the arc story. That's good. We
Okay.
need a blooper reel. Is the story?
Yeah. So, okay. So Rabbi Joseph had to take this Torah scroll out of the Ark that was on the farthermost right side. So it's a little tricky to get it, even though it's a small scroll. They're still kind of heavy, and you have to kind of wiggle it out. And there's a microphone there, and there's those lights, you know. And it had the rimonim, it had the jangly things on top. And it just so happens that on that Torah scroll, the 8 seam, the little things that the parchment is rolled around, the dowels are only, they're very short. So the rimonim were just kind of on top there. But she got it out and it was fine, and she took it over and we got it undressed and everything. But then when we went to take it back, for some reason, she's going up the steps. I think I was singing, and she kind of gets, I think this is for Yom Kippur. I don't think
It
this
is
was
for Yom Kippur. You haven't seen this yet.
Okay, you haven't seen it yet. So preview. But anyway, she's going up the steps and the Ark is open and I'm singing, and all of a sudden I see as she's trying to put it in that those rimonim are kind of like really dancing. And so she was with her head kind of like this, and they kept, it was like a silent movie with Buster Keaton on the side of the building. She kept, and then she would have to go the other way because of the weight of the Torah scroll. And she kept kind of going, literally, it was like minutes, kind of going back and forth and not being able to really get it into the Ark. And I finally, I was laughing, I was shaking with laughter. I mean, I was facing the Ark, and I finally started howling with laughter, and we had to call cut. And what was funny was all the production people who have so much respect, you know, for what we're doing, they weren't laughing. You know, they were like afraid to laugh. Like, this is a holy moment. We can't really laugh here. Anyway.
That was so good. And we needed that laugh.
We did. Yes, we did.
So just 2 things that I wanted to also tell about the process, and then we're happy to sort of have some conversations. The first is that after all of this filming and making sure that we got everything, because, you know, it's like you can miss something in the midst of all this. There was a lot of, we had to edit, and we participated, this very, very sweet guy, Matt, who's just really excellent and wanted our input in everything. So it was the system actually worked in a very interesting way, where he would send us the video on a program that we could make comments, and those comments appeared on that on the spot. Steve knows what we're talking about because from his production days. And so we were able to like give these comments all the way through, like, you know, is the fade right, or this is out of order, or whatever it might be. So we've actually watched the service like many times, and that is also sort of strange in a way. It's very odd seeing yourself in this way. It's just not what we're used to. And in the midst of that, one of the things that they did was take some images. Someone asked about this before. Take some images of the temple for what they call B-roll, and just these, and you saw those mixed in at various places. These beautiful close-ups of the stained glass windows. They did actually a time-lapse photography, so you could see the light change across the windows. They did some just nice close-ups of the Torah scrolls and elements that you're not used to seeing, because part of it, you know, we asked for that from the beginning, because as we're thinking about the emotion, a very big part of the emotion we know for everybody is just being in that space. And that part of what you do when you're sitting there is you just kind of look around and space out, especially while the rabbi's giving a sermon. And you're bored, so you're kind of looking around and, you know, at whatever is there. And you know, I think that, and we want that experience. You know, we wanted to create that experience for you. The other thing, and then I want to talk about sermons. The other thing was, Cantor really alluded to this when we were talking about the emotional chart. One of the most important things for me in taking a chance at doing this way was what we did Erev Rosh Hashanah for the first 15 minutes. That real section. I did not want to start with Shana Tova, the service is beginning, here we are in the pulpit, right? I wanted us all to kind of ease into that moment before the service started. That's why I wanted a countdown clock, so you weren't afraid, like, what am I seeing? I don't know what's happening here. And that was where the whole emotional chart that we had put together of what are we experiencing and what are we missing. That's where we really wanted to put that. That's where I wanted to see it on screen before we actually started the service. So if you remember, we started with that VidHug thing, which was just like people making short videos that get assembled into a little thing. So it was just from our home to your home, so that the whole replicating that whole thing of seeing people, just being in a crowd and saying hi to people and seeing faces that you're not used to. The exterior shots of the temple, I mean, that drone shot was pretty cool, right? Where you kind of like went down the city and then just kind of came down and saw the whole temple, and just that experience of that magnificent building from the outside, right? So it's sort of modeling that we're walking towards the building and seeing it and being reminded of how extraordinary it is and the beauty of the surroundings, the flowers and all of that, which they captured just so beautifully. And then the ushers, that whole sense of greeting and we had the 3 ushers who've been doing it for years. I didn't even know Steve Foreman had, until I saw them making this video, that Steve Foreman has been ushering for 51 years, right? I mean, the building wasn't 40 years old when he started ushering, just to, put that in context. And how welcoming they were, just how friendly that whole experience was. Etc. So we're not going to do that again. I really felt like we needed that for Rosh Hashanah, just to kind of get us into, this is a different experience, but we're paying attention to what we want to create and what we want to experience and all that. And then you can tell me if you think that worked or not. And we're taking a chance on everything. And then the last thing I want to say before we kind of open it up and get your feedback was about the sermons. We recorded the sermons late because we were thinking, who knows what's going to happen, and you don't want to miss it. So we recorded the sermons actually about a week and I recorded my sermons, both Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, about a week and a half ago, before the wildfires. The wildfires had been starting, but it was before all the smoke and everything that was there. So I had no idea that was going to happen. And of course, long before the death of Justice Ginsburg. So, you can plan and you can plan and you can plan and then life just takes you into a different realm. I don't know what we would have done differently. I don't know what sermon I would have written. I imagine had she died 3 weeks ago, probably our sermons would have been different. But in any case, that was what we were trying to do. But in the realm of, Josh's first response was, what can we do differently? I have to say personally, I'm really proud of Rabbi Joseph for taking a chance of doing a very, very different kind of sermon and doing it from her home and using the whole Zoom technology that most of us who've been spending all of our life on Zoom recently was super familiar to us. and wasn't familiar to any of us 6 months ago, of just like share screen and, you know, you know, all of that, which you can't do in a sermon, but, you know, here's an image of my lump of dough. I mean, I thought it was a terrific sermon to begin with, and had she done it in a standard, standing up in front of us and reading a sermon, it would have been a great sermon. And I'm just really proud that she took that chance and did it in a completely different mode that spoke to the reality of this moment. And I think that, you know, to me, that was both in form and in substance. I'm super proud of that. And again, if you go and look at the family service, you'll see a lot of that, all kinds of different things that we did. But the choir, that's the other thing I wanted to mention, the choir, the volunteer choir at the very beginning Friday night, the very first singing piece of music that you hear is that choir thing that was done, we've been talking about the technology that was required to do that. We had been talking about it for months and months and months. And it's actually very, very complicated to do. Thank you to all the choir members who know how hard it was just to make the videos. And then it was actually Cantor Green who assembled those videos and made it into that piece that we could then insert into the service. But we all wanted to see our volunteer choir at the very, very beginning. So it's community. Okay, that we did a lot of talking and in that behind the scenes. Would love to get your responses or questions or what worked for you, what didn't work for you, etc. So let me open it up. Who's got a concept?
Rabbi, I have one technical question, and then I know I've been talking too much today, so I'm going to shut up. But my technical question is about what you just said with the volunteer choir surrounding you know, Cantor Kahana. And I've always wondered, I know there's software that's designed to do that, but is there an easy way to describe, I mean, did everybody have click tracks and then there was some editing, or how did that work?
Yeah.
So we have, yes.
I was just going to explain acapella. You go ahead, please.
Yeah, there is a program, but we didn't use it. Actually, we didn't use acapella. But we had a pre-recorded track that I made with the professional quartet with the organ, and so the choir they had that in their ear. They were listening to that, and then they had their music in front of them, and then they were singing their part along with that track. And then once we got all of those, then you have to still line them up and put them all together. So Cantor Green used oh, now I forgot the name of it. Final Cut Pro. Final Cut Pro. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Is that how you did the shofar blowing, Cantor? Did they?
That was just simple Zoom. We just did a Zoom back and forth.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you were,
I was
giving.
Zoom.
You were saying teruah, and they were hearing it, and then they were.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
If we did it that way again, I would actually ask them to put on headphones, because I heard there was a little bit of an extra echo that you could hear Cantor through their Zoom, and so it wasn't quite as clean as it should have been. But I think it still worked pretty well. I think Adina had a question.
Lashana Tova, thank you. I was writing my response. I just wanted to express my gratitude to CBI because I'm single, unmarried, no kids, and I'm living at home all by myself, and I can't go out because I'm in one of those protected health classes. And I've wanted to attend High Holy Day services for years and haven't been able to because of financial reasons or other reasons. And so to be able to have this done virtually for me means I can fully participate the way that I've always dreamed of. And I was crying and I had my tissues and it was beautiful. And I just really appreciate being able to be here and participate in this way. So thank you.
So gratified.
Thank you so much,
that
Adina.
you could.
Yeah. I really, really appreciate you saying that. And I do want you to know that you're always welcome This was also one of the principles that we decided on very early on, and I didn't say that out loud. You know, in our sanctuary, we have limited space. In the virtual world, there is no limit. So, so we, you know, sometimes it's a shame that we sometimes have to say we need to know how many people are going to be there because, you know, all of those kinds, because sometimes we actually literally run out of chairs. But we said from the beginning, there's no limit. There's some places we're trying to do registration and things like that. We wanted no limit. We wanted anybody to be able to be a part of the service. And that's a guiding principle. So if you know anyone who's in a similar situation to Adina, for whatever reason, has not felt that they've been able to participate in high holiday services, please let them know about the service.
I have,
we really
I've
want
let
to.
my mom know, my brother know. I have a friend who isn't really observant, but I was like, you should go anyway. I have.
Thank
I've been
you.
grateful for it. Thank you. Yeah, glad to.
Thanks so
think-
much.
Thank you.
Appreciate that.
I think Debbie had her
Debbie,
hand
yeah.
up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, Debbie?
So I'm sending my question from our daughter Caitlin, who watched services.
Oh,
also.
did she? Great.
And she wanted to know, where did the chairs go on the Bima and why was the place that they weren't there?
Well, of course, she's going to be really observant about
I knew
those
you'd
kinds of things.
appreciate that.
I totally appreciate that coming from here. That was my mistake,
Oh,
and I've already made that I've already made that note for myself for if this ever happens again. As we were planning it, I thought that the presence of empty chairs in the filming would be odd and would make people, because we normally have the Bima full of our board members. And so I felt like if there's an empty chair, that's going to send the wrong message. And it's a little bit of also the principles of theater, like if there's something there, then you have to use it. So if there's a chair, somebody has to sit in it. But at watching it, and I actually saw this when I was looking at the original videos, the Bima looks empty, and the chairs are colorful, and it needed that color. So so I totally agree with Caitlin. She's right. We should have left the chairs there. But once we did it once, there was no choice. We had to do it for everything.
so now I have a question, and mine is, what did you guys do today? Since you didn't have to be at services, did you watch?
Yeah. Well, Cantor and I are having slightly different experiences. Yes, absolutely. I watched it, and I hit the button, you know, on time. I wanted to have that experience. It was lovely for me last night because I was with my kids. We Zoomed everybody in who wasn't there, able to be there. But it's very weird for me because I'm used to, I told them, I love seeing you in the congregation. It makes me so happy to see you when I'm up there, but I've never sat with you. So it was very strange because I don't like watching myself.
Of course.
And that part was not good, but being with them was really lovely.
Very nice. Thank you.
Rabbi?
Andrew, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about that.
Next.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah. So I think that we had Sherry was next.
Okay, I have to unmute.
You are unmuted. I hear you.
Am I? I thought I had
You are.
muted because I'm outside where there's noise. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say there were two things. One, you were going to explain how you came to the decision to, instead of tell the story of the Binding of Isaac, which is the first reading on Rosh Hashanah, you chose Bereshit. So I would love to have you address that. But I also want to address something to you. You were talking about how it might seem artificial that you were doing this finessed production, but as you said, it made it accessible to us in a way it might not have been with the kind of glitches that can happen with Zoom. So what you created for us, Cantor Ida Ray, Raina, rabbis, you gave us the beauty of the music that, you know, carries the prayer through our hearts and souls. It lifts our spirits and takes us where we want to be when we're praying. So thank you. It was gorgeous and meaningful and so uplifting. And also having the superficiality of production. I I love theater. I think what you do is you create a reality for people that way. It's not superficial. It's making what isn't real, as we're all on this virtual connection, real to us. So thank you. It was wonderful. And whoever you used did a superb job. So I love that they put the microphone there when you were down at the great Avino.
Elena, yeah. Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay,
Cantor, thanks so much. That's very sweet. Cantor, do you want to talk about Breshit?
Oh, okay, sure. We felt that there are different readings that you can do for first day or for second day Rosh Hashanah. And we felt that rather than do the binding of Isaac, which is such a disturbing story, that what we wanted to focus on was the possibility of hope and beginning, which is what Genesis represents to all of us, the possibility for new beginnings of how we create and recreate ourselves. So that was the intentionality. What we kept was the high holiday trope, so that you still had the sound of the high holidays, even though the words themselves were different. And much as I love to do the whole drama of the binding of Isaac, I just felt like I couldn't take one more horrible, upsetting story this year. That was personally. I mean, that wasn't the whole reason, but for me, that was part of it. Barbara, you had a question.
Yeah, first, I might have missed this. I've been up and down. I realized how much I missed the luncheon and the sisterhood cookies. So we were trying to do a family activity today. So we've been baking cookies and cookies and cookies. So I might have missed it, that we're creating our own cookie afternoon for dessert tonight. But I really missed that. But I am curious, you talked about all the decision making at CBI, how much like URJ and National Reform Judaism helped define this amazing inclusive community service. I'm just wondering how much each synagogue had to do on their own versus URJ helping. Yeah. And I'm sorry, you might have answered that when I was taking things out of
No, we didn't talk about that at all.
Very good question.
Thank you.
We so each one of us clergy sat in multiple webinars for, like, I was in some that were from the Union of Reform Judaism. I attended a lecture by Rabbi Larry Hoffman, who is an expert at liturgy. There was one just for the American Conference of Cantors, just specifically for cantors and music. There was another one about how to do virtual tefillah. So we each sat in multiple webinars, and we're all, of course, on social media with all of our clergy pals and kind of, what are you doing? What are you doing? Trying to get best ideas. So it was a flurry of constant communication with people across the country. The URJ was a big help. And I know they also did a lot of outreach to smaller congregations who wouldn't have the wherewithal to do the kind of production work that we did, relying on generosity of our congregation to support us in that. So thank God for the URJ. So we all learned a tremendous amount from everyone out there. Did I get that, Rabbi? I think I did.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. It's been a fascinating conversation, international conversation about how to do this, and then everybody's making their own decisions. So I think there's a lot. So there's a lot to learn. I think there's going to be a lot of conversation afterwards about what people felt worked. But I'm grateful for what we learned and the resources that we had available, and I'm grateful for all the local resources. And primarily, I have to say, having been in a few different congregations, really grateful for a congregation that is willing to trust us. and willing to try something very different. You know, that because that you couldn't do this everywhere. That's all I want to say about that.
I wasn't going to say anything before, but I'm going to say something now because I think I'm going to have to hop off this call. But anyway, a lot of you know that I'm in Pittsburgh with my mom, whose health is very rapidly declining. And, you know, one of the things that this pre-recording afforded me was the opportunity to be with her and be with my siblings, which is amazing. And she's not really left her bedroom for a week or more now, but she actually came out with me at one point with the walker and sat and listened for a while. So that was a tremendous gift. So.
Yeah.
Rabbi?
Jerry, I think you're next. Yes, sir.
Shana
Okay.
Tova.
Shana Tova. Thank you, Cantor.
Thank you.
Three things. The first thing is kudos to you and your whole staff. I thought the production was excellent. It came off great. Two suggestions. One suggestion and one question. The suggestion is I got on and used the virtual prayer book, and I came about that almost by accident, but it really was an excellent device and was being used on a separate device while I had the service on our TV. I used the virtual book off of my iPad, and if that could get out for the Yom Kippur services, I think people may be able to enjoy it a lot better if they haven't used those books. And
thank you. That's great.
The other thing is, I don't know if you've got any feedback of participation or if there even is any way of getting that, but it'd be interesting to hear how much of a group was able to hear your service, and if it's something that we can try to promote even better to get, because it was very easy. I mean, anybody that's got capabilities go on YouTube, it was very, very easy.
Thank you, Jerry. I'm really glad it was easy for you. We were very, very nervous about the technology and accessibility. Real kudos to Josh and to the team. We had, I don't know if anyone here took advantage of it, but we had a whole staff of our people standing by from before services started until almost it ended, taking phone calls from people who weren't quite sure how to get on YouTube. So next time, Jerry, I'm going to have them call you because you're obviously an expert at this. But you know, we made little videos. Steve was super helpful in helping us design beforehand formats for how to get onto YouTube or connect your laptop and all of those kinds of things. We did a cute little video to just sort of encourage people. But for some people it's really easy, and for some people it's a super challenge. And having this staff, which I think has been very, very busy, helping people, and we're going to get some reports back from them about how many people they helped. I think that was really, really great. To answer your question in terms of the number of people who watched it, there's some really interesting advantages to YouTube. One is the fact, from an accessibility standpoint, the fact that it was captioned and it has an automatic captioning system, which was very, very important to me. I almost shut the whole thing down for a time because I didn't think that the captions were working on YouTube, and I really was not. I didn't want to do it without captioning. I don't know how many people took advantage of it, but I wanted it to be there. But the other thing that YouTube tells us is how many views have happened. That doesn't tell us how many people, because one view could be a household, or it could be one person. And one person could also watch it several times. So it only gives us a sensibility. So Jerry, because I know you're a numbers guy, Erev Rosh Hashanah, over 1,300 views of that service. I mean, which is just remarkable to me. And on our broadcast services, we've never had numbers anywhere near that. Tot service that we put out early this morning and was available all day long because kids get up early sometimes and we wanted to give them something to do. That had over 146 views. The family service had over 204 views. And the traditional morning service today had 640 views so far today. So we're seeing, I mean, I think those are really good numbers.
Well,
we're really seeing a lot of people take advantage of it.
Last
To
night,
publicize that. Yeah, I think that should be publicized. I think it really is phenomenal. And I think people really would be interested in those numbers.
Yeah, I think you're right. But Jerry, I'm sorry,
no, at last night's service, you counted us as one view, but we had 4 people. So
yeah, right.
1,300, I think, is probably more people than the numbers indicate, and that's just excellent. That's just excellent.
Thank you. Yeah, I think. Well, Josh will know more about this, but I'd say you could conservatively double the number of views to get an idea of how many people actually watched it. And yeah, we're getting a couple of questions here. The videos are staying up, and one of the things that we're adding now after the service is some markers to let you jump to particular sections. So if you wanted to hear the sermon, we've got a link that just takes you right to that, so you don't have to scrub forward to it. Or if you want to share that with other people and say, you know, this was a really interesting sermon, I want to share that, we've got the link on our website that'll take you right to that.
I have a question also about that. First of all, I think we need to change the name of our organization to the Portland, Oregon Congregation Beth Israel, because on my Roku, I have to type the whole thing in.
You do have to type the whole thing.
And it doesn't remember. And so I had to do it every time. And that was—
Oh, the Roku doesn't remember
no,
it?
It does not remember. So I would honestly, I'm not joking. If you put Portland, Oregon first and then congregation, you'll probably get it right away, but we didn't.
Probably so.
So I think that would have been a big help. I just thought that I knew the number of views would be wonderfully high because, and I think the message will have spread. I think Josh, from what it looks like, you're still getting numbers in, and I think you'll get a lot of numbers for the morning service as well. I thought it was really, really well done.
Thank you.
The one thing I would suggest is that when Raina is singing with Cantor, her mic needs to be higher. Her voice is softer, and you use it. And I mean, you could hear it, but it was harder to hear her than to hear Cantor. And so I would, the next time you do this, or whenever you're doing anything with the two of them, their voices sound somewhat similar, but the timbre is different. And
yeah, thank you.
The harmonies were great, so I love that.
Great, thank you. That's good feedback. I'll talk to the sound guy about that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I wanted to also respond to Jerry's comment about the virtual prayer book. This is also, because you asked before about URJ, the CCAR, Central Conference of American Rabbis, which publishes the prayer books, made this available. And we also, there's a version that we might well purchase, which gives us the ability to do other kinds of things. But the fact is, as I think most of you know, you can we're loaning out the prayer books. So if you want a prayer book for Yom Kippur, just come by the temple and buzz, and there's a sign out. So you can borrow a prayer book, and the virtual prayer book is always available. I think it was in the notes on YouTube, but I don't think that everybody saw that, because I spoke to someone. This was one feedback I got from somebody who said, "We love the service, we just couldn't figure out why you guys kept talking about page numbers because nobody's got a book." It's like, yes, they do. You have a book. So so that is available, and I think one of the things, I'm going to have a slide before each service that reminds people where to go to get that, because what Jerry just described of watching the service on your TV and reading the prayer book on your iPad is exactly what we were hoping people would do. It's a two-device thing, but it works.
Rabbi, I don't know if this is I guess I just wanted to mention this quickly, and maybe it's something for next year, but you know those books are all available on Kindle as well. I have every one of our prayer books on my Kindle.
Yeah, very good point. Right, that's true. We hadn't really talked about that. Thank you. And I think it's less expensive.
Yeah, it's like 10 something to buy them as Kindle versions. So I bought both of them. Can I also suggest that maybe before we get to the weekend, a separate email go out talking about the virtual prayer books, so that people will get reminded how to go get them before looking at them on Sunday night and not knowing what to do on Sunday. I think that would be helpful. Very specific email.
Yeah, thank you. We'll talk about that. That's a great suggestion. I think it's important to you have to reiterate things, because just because we send out an email doesn't mean that everybody sees it. We're all inundated with so many different things, and we have to have multiple ways of getting information to people. But just as you're talking to people, all the update, all the very latest information is on the temple's website. That page, we've said it, Josh has helped everybody do this very clear, that there's only one place to, and Josh just put that website up and that particular page, there's one place that's updated and lots of different ways to get to that one place. But rather than trying to update things in several different places, which means there's going to be a mistake, everything will lead you to that one page. And so that those links and that information will always be accurate. Josh, is there anything I've been talking? Is there anything you want to add before we say goodbye?
Nope. It's lovely to see everybody, and we look forward to seeing everybody next week.
Thanks for being part of Behind the Scenes. I hope it didn't destroy too much of the magic. I started out a big part of my early theater career was working for a magician and at a theater where they held their meetings. And one of the things that was very, very important was that you don't reveal things. When asked how did you do it, the answer is very well. So I hope this didn't destroy too much magic, but I'm glad you appreciated it, and again, thank you for your patience, for your commitment to the temple. We love you. We love to create for you. Thank you, Libby. That was very funny. And we love to create with you. And this is all about the community that we create together. Shana Tova, or as we're saying, Shana Yoter Tova. May it be a better year as we get into this new year, 5781. We are looking ahead to really a really joyful, positive, community connective new year. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova.